Hello there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily, or at mhughesart, and I am so happy that you're here. Today I'm going to be painting with only acryl gouache for the very first time. So I've used acryl gouache in conjunction with regular gouache before, but I've never done an entire painting with just acryl gouache up until today, of course. So to start off, I decided to do a super quick little cat study in my sketchbook using just this Turner set. And I gotta say, I really adored these paints. I loved them so much I decided to do a few more portraits in my 100 painted heads challenge. So sit back, relax, maybe have a warm beverage or a snack, or you can sketch along with me, paint along with me, and we can work alongside each other. So this is the designer gouache palette that I normally use, but we're gonna put that aside today, and I'll be using these Turner gouaches as well as a few Holbein acryl gouaches, especially this lilac color, because if you've seen any of my videos, I love a pale purple in my palette, especially for portraits. It's a bit of a tongue twister, pale purple palette portraits. Because these are acrylic based gouache, when they dry, they're dry. They do not re-wet with water. So because of that, I like to use a stay wet palette while I'm working, and I find it just keeps the paint nice and wet for the painting process. So I've just got some synthetic brushes that I can use today, and let's get started. I started with this reference that I found on Pinterest. I really liked it because you can tell it was taken with an older camera with the flash turned on, which I always find makes for really interesting references. It reminds me a lot of my childhood photos from the early 2000s. Here I am explaining that this mark on my arm is a jellyfish sting. It's almost completely healed now though. But back to what I was saying. I did a whole series of paintings from my old family photos when I was in art school. I really, in particular, loved painting from a Polaroid photo because it makes the contrast of darks and lights very extreme. It sort of flattens the image, where the distracting visual information is kind of already taken out for you. And it's a really cool way to learn what needs to be there and what doesn't need to be there in order to, capture a likeness and to create a good painting. Maybe there's a couch and a lamp in the background, but they are just a soft, hazy silhouette. Yeah, it can make for a very cool painting. So I'm always intrigued when I find photos like this. Another thing I wanted to say about this painting in particular is the mouth and the teeth. I know a lot of people struggle with that, and I think I did when I was a younger artist or earlier on in my art journey. I just want you guys to remember that the teeth are sitting behind the face, they're sitting behind the lips, and they're going to be a lot darker in value than your brain is telling you they are. So that's my little top tip for teeth. What it was earlier, pale purple palette portrait and top tip for teeth. That's why I should not be recording my voiceover when I'm tired. So the few people that didn't just exit the video from that terrible joke, I wanted to say that for these portraits, I am working mostly dark to light as much as I can, and I think that technique worked pretty well for the acryl gouaches. Something I really liked about these gouaches versus the, regular gouache is that I find that you don't have to worry about going over top of areas and lifting the paint underneath. You can do sort of glazes with this and it still ends up looking okay. It doesn't make a muddy mess. So for that, big points to Acryl Gouache. Maybe a downside to these guys is that, like I said, when they're dry, so you really just want to squeeze out the colors you're gonna use, and that's kind of what I did. If I ran out of a color on my palette, I would squeeze a little bit more, but I figured that would be better than wasting a whole bunch of paint. And I gave myself the whole 12 color set on my palette, but I actually didn't end up using the 2 greens in the Turner set hardly at all. I maybe didn't use them at all, and I also didn't use the sky blue very much. I stuck to the warmer cobalt blue, which to me just felt more familiar because I'm used to working with a ultramarine blue in my oils. But certainly if there was a cool green blue lighting on a portrait, then those would be the guys to grab. So a few people asked me if I could show my references or share my Pinterest board, and I thought that was a great idea. So I created a Pinterest account that you guys can go follow, and I'll be pinning and posting my reference photos from my videos from now on, so you can sketch them as well if you're interested. I'll have it linked down below. I also created a board for my Painted 100 Heads challenge, if you'd like to have a go at painting the same heads or trying this challenge. A couple of the portraits I did at the start of the challenge aren't there because they were posted in an artist reference group chat, but I will try to stick to Pinterest references for the rest of the challenge. I also started a hashtag on Instagram, so if you want to share your painted heads with me and this community, you can use that tag and I'll be able to see it. Right now it is only my work on that tag, but I think it would be really cool if all of our painted heads were there in one place and we can support each other. I was really pleased with how this first portrait turned out. It was exactly how I want these studies to be, very loose and focused on brushstroke and direction and shape. So yeah, overall very happy with this one. This one was actually done on a different day from the other 3. It was later in the day, and yeah, I just kind of ran out of time because I spent the earlier part of the day filming another video that should be up next week. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of filming, so there should be videos up every week, probably every Sunday for the next little while. Yeah, so that's good. I definitely don't want to burn out. These videos do take a long time for me, but I think every week or every second week is good for me. Okay, so on to the second portrait. I'm kind of starting it in a similar way. Just go in with a mixture of the sienna, I think it's burnt sienna, and a little bit of the red in the Turner set, the cooler red. And I just start by almost re-sketching in the portrait with a thin brush, and then I go in with a big flat brush and block in the major shadow shapes. I just found that this seems to be a method that works well for me. I use more water to start, and then I use less as I go. I do find that it's not as much of a big deal with the amount of water you use as it is for a regular gouache painting, which is something I really like about the acryl gouache. So after blocking in the main shadow shapes, I like to go in with the darkest of the darks in the portrait. And this is usually around the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, all these places that have occlusion shadows, which are the shadows that occur where 2 things meet and touch or are very close to touching. I hope you guys enjoy that funny little diagram I just made. So to make sure that everything looks right and, normal, naturalistic, I will make sure that I get those darks in first. I also like to get the whites of the eyes in fairly early on, and this is usually a very neutral gray. And the reason I get this in early on is because I need to make sure it looks like it is behind. So I want to be able to paint the lid and the pupil on after. When working with gouache, both acryl and regular, I've learned to treat it almost like I'm sculpting form. I really try to focus on the planes and the values of those planes. I've been trying to train my brain to see value first before color, but it is something I really struggle with. But keeping that in mind really helps while working. The colors don't actually matter so much if you nail the values. You could paint a portrait in the wackiest colors imaginable, but our brains will still recognize them as faces if you get your values and your shapes relatively accurate. Yes, retraining the brain is a tricky task, but I think it's a good thing to, keep in the back of your mind while you're working. I thought this second portrait went pretty well, but there were definitely things that I liked about it and things that I didn't really like about it. But I think as a whole, it was a positive painting experience. I really enjoyed how the forehead and I guess the scalp turned out, as odd as that sounds. I just love all the colors I used up there and the bolder brushstrokes. I think that's the place that my eyes are the most pleased to settle on while looking at that painting, if that makes any sense at all. Okay, moving on to the third portrait. I wanted to do a black and white study. I did this in my last 100 painted heads video. I just think it's a really good way to recalibrate, I guess. And it's just removing the distracting colors and just focusing entirely on values. I try super hard to stick to just about 5 or 6 values. You don't need any more than that. You will have some softer places in the portrait where 2 values will meet, and that will create the more nuanced values in between. Yeah, it's a good idea to really try and stick to a 5 value scale. Keep it nice and simple for yourself. So I mentioned in my last 100 heads video that I really enjoy drawing and painting older individuals. I think aged faces are really beautiful and offer a lot to a painting. That being said, if you find yourself only painting or drawing one type of portrait, whether it be a specific age or gender or skin tone, I definitely recommend trying to mix it up a bit. There is a huge spectrum of human faces, of course. I always feel like I never want myself to get too comfortable in art, because then I feel like I'm not learning anything, and I think as an artist, we are always aiming to grow. And I think that's what makes a 100 heads challenge like this so useful for growing as a portrait artist. So this third portrait, this value study, was a nice and quick one, which was good because it gave me the confidence to try and tackle the final portrait of the spread. If you notice, the sketch of the fourth portrait is different than what the painting ended up being. That's because it is. I attempted painting the first sketch, but the angle and lighting of the reference was really challenging, and I just couldn't get it right. Didn't look right. So after a few attempts, I decided to paint over it and try a different portrait instead. And I'm really glad I did, because I ended up liking the new painting much more. I think I was pretty tired from the struggle of the first attempt, so the second portrait didn't turn out amazing, but I was satisfied with it enough, and I felt as though it was a good learning experience, so I was happy to leave it at that. I kept the reference for the other portrait on my Pinterest 100 Heads board because I might want to try it again sometime during this challenge. maybe in oils instead of gouache, or maybe I'll have the guts to attempt it in gouache again. But I did like that covering it up gave me this nice pink backdrop for this portrait, and I think it really balanced out the spread with the green backdrop behind the first portrait. So I think it was a happy outcome in the end. I did struggle with this face as well, maybe because it is a woman and she had very soft features. I guess especially after the older gentleman, I really had to focus on making her face look smoother. Yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge, but it ended up okay. I had fun painting her gold hoop earrings. I once heard somebody say that in portrait painting, jewelry is not only decoration for the person, but it's also decoration for the painting. Okay, so that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to let me know in the comments which portrait was your favorite. Mine was definitely the first portrait. It's making me feel like I need to do more heads with exaggerated expressions because it was so much fun. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye!